This video will show you how to replace the fuel pump sending unit on a Ford Transit-250. This will be located inside of your fuel tank. Let's get into it. A quick note about doing this job, we will have to lower the fuel tank to gain access to the fuel pump. Make sure you're in a safe area to do so. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. Now before we can start any of the removal process, we need to relieve pressure from in the fuel system. So we're starting under the hood at the fuse panel. To dislodge the fuse panel cover, it has one locking tab along the forward side. We're pressing it in. We should be able to tilt this out of position. Now as I flip this over, we have our fuse box legend. We're looking for fuse F16. I've marked it in yellow. We need to find that in the corresponding area on the fuse panel itself. Now on my application, it's this yellow 20 amp fuse right out in the open. We'll take hold of the fuse. We'll pull it out of place. I'm just using some pliers for this. Typically you can do it by hand. A quick inspection of the fuse. We're going to temporarily set this aside for now. Now that we have that out, the next thing we need to do is make our way inside the passenger compartment. We're going to attempt to start the vehicle. You may find it starts and stalls out, or it just doesn't start at all. That's exactly what we're looking for. Now that we've done that, we're reinstalling the fuse into the original positioning. Line it up, press it down as far as possible. Double check to make sure you're in the proper placement. After that, go ahead and protect the area with its plastic protective cover. Now looking along the rearward side, you have two locating tabs. Those fit down into their corresponding areas. We'll roll this down. Just a couple light taps, make sure it's secured in place. Now let's make our way into the passenger compartment so we can disconnect our negative battery terminal. To disconnect the negative battery terminal, we're along the driver's side of the vehicle. We slid our driver's side seat forward as far as possible. Once you've done that, we're paying attention in this area here. We can see that we do have an electrical wiring harness leading across here, but there's actually a plastic panel up along the top of the negative battery terminal. To dislodge this, you're going to find you have a locking tab. I'm lifting this up. Now I can pull up on this trapdoor. We're going to slide it away. Looking at the trapdoor itself, it does have two small locating tabs along the rearward side. Those would slide into their corresponding areas deep in here. To disconnect the negative battery terminal, we're using a 10mm. We have a mounting nut right here. Let's loosen this just enough that we can remove the terminal end from the battery post. Just a quick inspection of that battery terminal, we'll set it aside. After disconnecting that, let's make our way under the driver's side of the vehicle. Now this is where we can see our fuel tank. We're going to have to apply upward support. We'll make sure we're as centered as possible on the fuel tank, and we'll continue on looking at the fuel filler hose next. Now that I have support underneath the fuel tank, we're going to be starting to remove our fuel tank strap mounting hardware. You're going to find that there are 6 13mm headed mounting bolts holding it in place, 3 along either side of the fuel tank. Let's go ahead and remove all of these. Now throughout this process, we are not using any electric tools in case there's any fuel vapors in the air. Let's make our way to the other side of the fuel tank next. Now I'm on the other side of the fuel tank. We can see our straps and our hardware. Now since my middle strap is not being held up by anything, I can remove that. Just a quick inspection of it and we'll set it aside. Go away all the way to the last one on the back side here. Now this strap pretty much comes out of here on mine as well, so I can remove that. Just remove any straps as you deem necessary. Now after removing all that, we're paying attention to our fuel filler hose as it leads up to our fuel filler neck. Now keep in mind there could be fuel in this area. Let's be aware of that. In this area, we can see that there's a 7mm headed clamp, so I'm just going to loosen that enough that I can remove the hose from the filler neck. Now at this point, you should be able to take hold of this, give it a twist. If it does not slide out of position, carefully use a hose pick, but be careful not to cause any damage to the hose. So I'm just using an angled pick for this. Just a quick inspection of that hose to confirm it's still soft and pliable, not torn, worn, or damaged. This looks good. After that fuel filler hose, let's make our way towards the front of the fuel tank here. This is where we can see our evap and fuel lines heading in this direction. So we're going to start with this line here. Now this does have a locking tab on it that we need to pull down. Once we've done so, it has a secondary tab that we also need to dislodge. This one first, right out in the open. I'm just using a small pocket screwdriver. You could also use a pick. We'll just try to pull this down. Now that we have that out of position, let's just take hold of the line. I'm going to give it a twist and slide it out of position. Just a quick inspection of that line. Let's continue on. Now we can follow these forward. Now we do have a mounting point next to our charcoal canister. This is attached to the frame of the vehicle. I'm just going to use an angled pick to break this free. It has a small locking tab. Once you have that dislodged, we should be able to pull these lines out of place. There's one. As we follow these lines forward, now I can see that we do have a mounting point for our line onto the other line. So I'm just going to go ahead and separate that. Now this line right here is the one that we're aiming for, the top line leading to the charcoal canister. We do not need to dislodge this lower line. Now to remove this, what you're going to find is that you have two small tabs that are located deep inside this area. Can be fairly difficult to gain access to by hand. I'll show you once it's apart. For this, I'm using an angled pick. I want to try to make my way underneath each one of those two tabs and gently start pressing this up. This will dislodge this. Now we can see that the plastic locking clip has been lifted up. Let's go ahead and pull that away from the charcoal canister. We'll give it a quick inspection. Now I'll just pull this down so we can have a quick look inside here. Now after dislodging that, we're focusing on the fuel line itself. As far as the fuel line disconnection, you do have a blue locking tab. Now, if you were looking at the rearward side, it has 4 tabs holding this entire locking tab in place. We're going to have to contend with each one of these at the same time. You can carefully try pulling these out by hand. If needed, you can also use a small pick as a prying device. Let's be careful not to cause any damage. So as far as these tabs, we just want to carefully pull them away. While we're pulling them away, I'm going to try pressing that blue tab up and out. One side. Now when you do go to dislodge this, once you get all 4 tabs dislodged, it may just fall right out of place. Just a quick inspection of that, confirming it's still in good usable order. Now as we dislodge this fuel line, keep in mind there could still be fuel inside of this line. Be aware, don't let it get on your skin or in your face. There we go. Now I just have a small cover I'm going to slide over my fuel line here. After disconnecting each one of the 2 lines, let's go ahead and pull them out through this area so they do not get caught on anything. So for this, I'm just going to take hold of the line. Let's get this fuel line. At this point, let's start carefully lowering the fuel tank down just enough that we can gain access along the top. Now that I have my fuel tank lowered down far enough that I can gain access along the top passenger side of the fuel tank, I can see my wiring harness with my 2 electrical connectors. For the forward connector, this one's fairly simple. It has one locking tab along the top. I'm just pressing that in, and then I'm going to pull this connector out of place. A quick inspection for corrosion. This looks good. We'll set it aside. Now as far as this next wiring harness and connector, it's a little different here. For this, we have one area that we need to carefully pry up and away. This is a securing point. I'm just going to use a trim tool. You can use a flat blade screwdriver if necessary. Now we can continue on to that electrical connector. For this connector, it does have a red locking tab. We need to carefully make our way in between this area to pry it out and away. Typically, it will not become fully dislodged from the connector. Once you've done that, we'll continue on to the next locking tab. Now it's fairly difficult to see up in this area. I'm just using a flat blade screwdriver. I'm coming up and down like this, gently twisting, and as you can see, I did pull that away. So now we'll move along to our next locking tab, as I mentioned, right in the center. Just like the other one, we're going to press this down and we should be able to pull this one out of place as well. Thorough inspection for corrosion. This looks good. At this point, we can fully lower this fuel tank down to a position that we can easily gain access to the top to start removing that fuel pump. Now at this point I have it in an area that I can gain access along the top center of the fuel tank. This is where our fuel pump sending unit is going to be located. Now it is common to have debris up along this area and we don't want anything making its way inside of the fuel system, so I'm going to use some compressed air. We'll give this a quick blast, removing as much debris as possible. After cleaning along the top, I like to use some penetrant along where the locking ring would be. And then we're going to continue on to each of our lines next. Now let's start with the forward line. This one does have two locking tabs. We can see one right here out in the open. It has a second one just below it. Typically for these, you can take them by hand, start pulling them away. We'll slide this towards this portion. Now if you wanted to, you could actually use it as a prying device as well. I'm just gonna make my way under and pressing on the tabs. Let's just see if this moves. Just a quick inspection of that locking tab. Now after removing that blue locking tab, I like to use some penetrant. There is going to be some O-rings inside of here. I like to make sure I can lubricate those. There is one more locking tab. Now for this one, we're going to be using an angled pick. I can see one of my locking ears right here. See how I'm prying out on it? And I should be able to start pressing this away. Okay, we can see we still have our locking tab in good usable order there. I'm going to leave this in the unlocked position. Now for our next line, I'm going to make my way all the way down to this area so we can break it free from the tank. Should simply pull right out of there. There we are. Just pivot this. Now we can see where the locking tabs are on our connector. Now we will have to contend with each of these tabs. You may need several tools. For these larger ones here, we're going to carefully start pulling them away, but you'll find that it can only go so far. We need to make our way to the smaller tabs as well. Those just get pulled away, and then this should get pressed down as we're doing so. You can see that it did lift up. Keep in mind, as you start dislodging this line, there could still be fuel on either end. Let's go ahead and give this a little wiggle. We're sliding it out of position. Now we can move along to our next line. Just as before, I like to gain access along the bottom. So I'm going to move where it connects onto the fuel tank here. We'll separate this. There we go. So now we should be able to take hold of the line. We're going to carefully start twisting it, and we can see our locking tabs along the bottom area. Now for these locking tabs, the larger ones, we need to squeeze towards the center. As for these smaller ones that you can easily see on the outboard side there, those will need to be pulled outward. Now I can see that that did lift. Let's pull this away. Gentle twist as we do so. Of course, a quick inspection inside of that line, confirming we have not caused any damage. This looks good. Let's set that aside. Now that we have the lines off, let's pay attention to this plastic ring. This is held in place with 3 10mm headed mounting nuts. During the removal process, let's be careful not to cause damage to the studs. There's a lot of rust here. Let's continue on here. We'll give that a wiggle, lift it up and out of position. We will be reusing this. For now, let's set it aside. Continuing on, we want to pay attention to any miscellaneous rust or debris along this top area. What's about to happen is we're going to use a hammer and a brass punch. We have to start driving this locking ring counterclockwise. Now, if you were looking closely at the fuel tank and the locking ring, the fuel tank will have several locking tabs that stick up. These are part of the tank itself. You need to confirm they're not rotted and weak. As we start turning this counterclockwise, we need to make sure that those tabs fit into the larger holes in each one of the slots. So I'm using a brass punch and a hammer. We want to be careful not to cause any sparks. You can see it's starting to work here. This is exactly what we're looking for. Now, before this completely lifts up, I want to try to remove any debris from along the top of this, so I'm continuing on with some compressed air. Let's go ahead and clean this down. Okay, so our locking ring did pop free. This is exactly what we need to see. You're going to want to make sure you clean this down, double check to make sure it's not rotted and weak. A little bit of rust is okay, but we do need to make sure it's not rotted. Now, as I get ready to lift this up, I have a collection receptacle off to the side. When we do lift this up, there could still be fuel trapped inside of the unit itself. You will also have a fuel level float that we need to contend with. It's going to be a semi-tight fit here. So now as you start lifting this up, you may find that it's an extremely tight fit. If you do have to pry, let's just be careful not to cause any damage. We'll make our way along one edge and the other, and we'll get this out of place. We can see our float. There it is, friend. With that fuel pump assembly out of position, the next thing we have to do is focus on the tank itself. Your tank will have a seal. We're going to remove that. We'll set it aside. Now, continuing on, we need to clean the area of the tank that has the seal. And then we're also going to thoroughly inspect each one of our locking tabs. For this, I'm just using a rag. I'm going to make a quick swipe all the way around this, removing as much miscellaneous debris as possible. As I clean this out, I want to try to pull it out and away from inside the tank. I don't want anything making its way inside this area. There we are. After cleaning that, it's time for our seal. This should just rest directly inside that circular port that we had just finished cleaning. Now, as we start bringing the fuel pump assembly into position, there's one area on the fuel tank that we want to pay attention to. We can see right here I have two slashes, and in between them it says locator. This is for the locating tab on the fuel pump. Let's get ready to install that fuel pump. We'll make sure we have it in the proper orientation. The fuel float should be facing towards the rear of the vehicle, or the rear of the fuel tank. Let's start bringing this down into position here. Now, as I continue on bringing it all the way down, we want to pay attention for this one area here. This is the locating tab, and that would fit in with that locator area there that I had pointed out. Go ahead and line this up. We're pressing it down as far as possible, and we'll continue on with our locking ring. So now as we start bringing over our locking ring, we'll get this in position here. Now we're going to have to press down on the fuel pump as far as possible. We're going to take our locking ring. We need to align the locking tabs with the larger diameter area of each one of the slots, and we'll be pivoting this clockwise to lock it in position. Of course, we do want to pay attention to the orientation. We want to make sure each of the studs are in the proper placement. So let's just press this down. We'll make sure it's in the proper placement here. Locking ring as well, pressing it down as far as possible. I'll just start turning this clockwise. Now, before we go any further, fully tightening this, you need to make sure that each one of these tabs is making its way into the proper placement. We don't want one area sticking up. So I'm using my hammer and brass punch. I'm just going to start tapping this clockwise now. If you were to look closely at this, you can tell that I'm definitely not completely locked in. That's an important thing to note. This has to be completely locked in. You do not want this coming loose while you're driving down the road. Just double check all the way around. Now it's time for our plastic locking ring. If you were looking at it, you can see that we do have an arrow on it that would be facing towards what would be forward on the fuel tank or on the vehicle itself. We're going to align it with its corresponding studs. Just a quick inspection to make sure this is actually aiming forward where that line would be. This looks good. Let's start on all three of our mounting nuts, and then we'll snug them up. Now it's time to start reattaching our fuel lines. I'm going to start with the forward line. We do have a locking tab, so once I have this pressed all the way into position, I'm going to make sure I lock it in. Pressing that on as far as possible. Audible click there. Let's lock it down. Let's just make sure that that does not move around. It is secured, so now we're going to install our secondary lock. We'll make sure we have it in the proper orientation. It's fairly difficult to see from this angle. I'm going to line it up, press it in. Listen for a click. Double check to make sure that's secured. This is extremely important. Now it's time for our large evap line. That's going to go into this area here. Press it on as far as possible. While holding pressure, we're going to press down on our locking tab. Audible click from that. And it's secure. Now we can make sure we press this into the fuel tank. And we can move along to our next line. Let's move along to our next line. We're just going to slide this onto the fuel pump as far as possible. While holding pressure, lock it down. And of course, double check to make sure it's secured in place. We'll secure it to the fuel tank. Now, one last quick inspection while we're still in this area, confirming that everything is properly secured. We do not want to have any fuel leaks or vapor leaks once this is back in the vehicle. This looks good. Let's make our way back over to the vehicle with the fuel tank. You'll find that I'm using a ratchet strap to hold my shields in place. So now as I bring this up, I'm coming up high enough that I can gain access to my two electrical connectors. Let's start with the larger one first here. Press it in. Listen for an audible click, a light tug to make sure it is in the proper placement, and we're going to lock it down with our red locking tab. This should press all the way through. On to the next electrical connector. Line it up, press it on. Audible click from that, and it's secure. We're going to make sure we secure this into the proper placement here. So now we're going to secure the wiring harness that will go directly into this plastic shield. We'll make any adjustments as necessary. One last quick inspection in this area. We'll start bringing the tank into the fully upright position. Now as we start bringing the fuel tank up, you're going to find on each side of the fuel tank, you can clearly see where each one of the straps would go. Feeling along the top of the tank, it also has an indent. As far as that indent, it would align with the actual body of the vehicle. So shift forward or rearward as necessary as we continue up. While holding light pressure on this, we can continue on with our 3 fuel tank straps. Okay, so now at this point, I've got everything aligned here. I've got my inboard bolts. This is one of the shorter bolts from my forward strap. All the shorter bolts will go on the inboard side. The longer bolts go on the outboard side of the straps. At this point, we're only starting in each of our straps. We'll tighten everything once it's all started in the proper positioning. Now along the outboard side of that strap, we have our longer bolts as I mentioned. Let's get this aligned. Okay, that's the forward strap. We're making our way to the center and then onto the rear after we finish this. Now onto the center strap. If you were looking at the areas that go straight up and down, you're going to find that the inboard side is a little bit longer than the outboard side. Now that we have the outside done, let's make our way to the center area here for the center strap. So we're making our way to the rear strap now. Let's go ahead and get the center bolt started in. That's the shorter of the two. There's that bolt. Let's make our way to the outboard side of this next. Now, since we don't have to worry about those shields coming off anymore, let's go ahead and remove the straps prior to tightening this. Now we can lightly bottom out each one of the fuel tank straps. We're going to snug all 6 of the mounting bolts. The torque for these will be 35 foot-pounds. Now I've got my torque wrench, 35 foot-pounds. Let's make our way to the inboard side mounting bolts next. Inboard side. Time to torque all of them. Once you've torqued all of those, go ahead and remove pressure from under the fuel tank. So we have the fuel tank fully mounted. We're along the front of the tank. We're going to start attaching our lines next. So just in between the fuel tank and that charcoal canister, we have one line that slides on right over here. Just line it up, press it on as far as possible. Okay, so I have that pressed on as far as possible. Now, if you did remove your plastic locking tab, you're going to want to make sure you reinstall that. Ours was damaged, so I have a brand new one here. I'm just going to line it up, we'll press it in, and double check, make sure that's secured in place. This should not move around in any way. Now, as we move towards the forward portion of these lines, they will have to make their way up and over this wiring harness along the forward portion of the charcoal canister. We'll just gently flex things as necessary. You can do them one at a time if necessary here. There's one. So we have the larger of the two lines. This is the evap line. We're pressing that onto that evap canister as far as possible. Now, once you have it pressed into position, we're going to lock it down with our green locking tab. Just press that towards the line. Double check to make sure that's secured in place. Let's move to the fuel feed line next. Now, since I did put a cap on this, I'm just going to slide it out of position. Let's connect these two lines together. Press them together and we'll continue on with our locking clip. Now, as for our locking clip, we need to pay close attention. Now, if you were looking in the center of where we're looking at here, you can tell that I do have locking tabs. As I spin it around, the other side does not. Now, what we need to do is pay attention to the line itself. We want to have it so that the area with the locking tabs is facing towards the line that leads up towards the engine. So we're just going to take this, we're going to line it up, start pressing it through. Now we're looking along where our locking tabs are. We need to make sure those are completely situated. Let's take hold of both of the lines. We're attempting to separate them. This should not slide out of place. Make sure you resecure these lines. So if we look up along the body of the vehicle, on my application when I was working on this, it did pop out of place, and that's common. We're just going to press it right back up and in. We'll follow to the next mounting point here. Now this just goes over the other line fairly simply. Now we're up in this area where this is going to be secured to the body of the vehicle. So now as we start looking up in here, we want to make sure the lines are in the proper placement. It looks as though my first larger line is already slid into the bracket there. It just presses in. The second line is going to do the same thing. Presses right in. Now, of course, we do want to make sure we lock it down. We'll bring this over, press that in. There we go. Double check to make sure each of those lines is properly secure. Now it's time for our fuel filler hose. This makes its way from the fuel tank up towards our fuel filler neck. We're going to line this up. I'm pressing it up as far as possible. Now we're going to make sure we have our clamp in the proper positioning. We can see exactly where it was. That's where I want to have it during the installation process. We need to see hose on both sides of that clamp. Just going to adjust my clamp. Now that I have this bottomed out, I'm just going to take it a tiny bit further. We want to be careful not to strip this. Otherwise, you need to replace it. Double check to make sure that's secured. Now, one last quick inspection while we're still under the vehicle, confirming that we've tightened everything as necessary. After that, make your way out from under the vehicle, back into the passenger compartment so we can reconnect our negative battery terminal. Now it's time to install the negative battery terminal onto the battery post. As far as this is concerned, we have a battery brush. I'm going to clean the battery post. We'll just make sure there's no miscellaneous corrosion or debris. After completing that, we also need to make sure we clean the terminal end. I'm using the wire brush portion of this battery brush. We're cleaning the inside diameter there. This looks good. Let's go ahead and get this onto the battery post. As far as this is concerned, we're going to carefully line it up, press it onto the battery as far as possible. Tighten your 10mm mounting nut. There's bottomed out. Just a tiny bit further here. Let's make sure we're secured. This should not move around in any way. Go ahead and protect the area. Now, as I mentioned during the removal process, we do have two small locating tabs. Those are going to go into these slots you can see right along here. We're just coming in at an angle starting with the rearward side. Press those into their corresponding ports. After you have that in the proper placement, we're rolling this down along the front. In the front, you remember we do have a locking tab. The locking tab goes up and along the top of this. Press it in, we're listening for an audible click, and we're making sure it's secured all the way around. Let's set our seat to the preferred position. After reconnecting that negative battery terminal, it's time to attempt to start the vehicle. Now, what you might find is when you attempt to start, the vehicle may run and stall out, or you might find it just continuously runs, which is exactly what we need. Let's go ahead and give this a try. Perfect. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.